I want to take a moment to tell you about Ballot Ready. The election is right around the corner, and this year, with changes to polling places and vote-by-mail laws as a result of COVID, it's more important than ever to have a plan to vote. And even though this is a presidential election, there are many more candidates on the ballot besides the president. Our local elected officials affect our lives every day. Go to Ballot Ready for a nonpartisan guide to your entire ballot. From there, you can compare candidates based on stances on issues, view their biographies or endorsements, and then save your choices to use when you vote by mail or when you are in the voting booth. You can even request your absentee ballot or make a plan to vote early or on election day. This election matters, folks. Make sure you have a plan to vote and vote informed. Go to ballotready.org and enter your address to make a plan to vote.
Welcome to the 99% Loco Podcast.
Hey, podcast family, welcome to another week of the 99% Local Podcast. This week brings us to episode number 46. Each week, me, your host, Chris Green, am bringing stories of Nashville and Middle Tennessee-based entrepreneurs, business owners, authors, musicians, and other creators. Everyone has a story, their own unique upbringing, and a passion for why they're doing what they're doing. I personally love the sense of community around Nashville and get my kicks from sharing these stories. This week's guest is Amanda Garren. Amanda is the founder and president of an organization called Nashville Angels, which builds community and hope for foster care families around Nashville. The mission of Nashville Angels is to walk alongside children in the foster care system, as well as their caretakers, by offering consistent support through intentional giving, relationship building, and mentorship. In college, Amanda had the idea to start a nonprofit, but she was unsure of what that would look like. After moving to Nashville and stumbling upon a podcast featuring Susan Ramirez from Nashville Angels, she knew this was the opportunity that she was called for in Nashville. Amanda believes that every child should have the opportunity to dream and to chase those dreams. I'm really looking forward to having Amanda share her story and everything her team are doing with Nashville Angels. With that, let's get right into it. Here is my conversation with Amanda Garren, founder and president of Nashville Angels. So Amanda, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. How are you today?
I am doing great. Thanks for coming on the podcast. You know,
Absolutely.
I originally heard about you and what you're doing with Nashville Angels through Wendy Stevenson.
Yes.
And I believe you know Wendy, and she's actually was involved or is involved with Nashville Angels.
Yeah, so she was on our board for a while, and then she took off with her business. So now she's just a wonderful community member that we have that, you know, donates her time and energy to us when she can.
Wendy's been on the podcast. She's a friend of mine, so love everything about her. So
absolutely, same.
Yeah. So you're the executive director of Nashville Angels, which seems like some pretty big shoes to fill because what are you, in your late 20s, like 27?
Yeah, I just turned 27. Yeah.
Nashville Angels, for those listening, is an organization where, you know, your mission is to really change how children and parents experience foster care. And we're going to dig into that. But I didn't realize that there was actually a national organization called Nashville Angels.
Yes.
That goes to show how much I knew about this. But and then there's various cities throughout the U.S. that have different chapters and things like that. So, you know, the first thing I wanted to ask you is, all over social media, you have this hashtag of "It Takes a Nash Village." You know, before we really dig into Nashville Angels and what you're doing, can you kind of explain the meaning behind that?
Yeah. So when we were gearing up for our big payback campaign, which is a community-wide fundraiser here in Nashville and Middle Tennessee, where hundreds of nonprofits get together for a big kickoff to discuss what big payback is, bounce ideas off of each other, and then go out in the community and raise money for their mission. And so we had all these big plans for all these wonderful in-person events that we were going to do. We were going to shoot for 3 events in 24 hours. And And then COVID-19 happened and they said, so you can't have any in-person events. So get creative and launch some kind of social media campaign, which we had planned on doing alongside anyway. And I went back and forth for what felt like ever to decide what can we do that will grab people's attention, that also goes right inside with what we're doing to get our name out there and have people hear what we're doing. And I was texting my social media guru that is on our board. And I was like, I want to have some big hashtag, something that can launch, that we can continue using, something about how it takes a village. Because I feel like, I don't know, growing up, I always heard like it takes a village to raise a child. And I feel like we've kind of not really gone away from that, but you don't hear it as much. But also like there are tons of foster parents who don't have that kind of village around them. And so Danielle and I were talking and she was like, what about it takes a Nash village? Because we're in Nashville. This is where we are. And a lot of people who live here now are not originally from here. So you think about all these foster parents who move here and then become foster parents. Their families aren't here. They don't have that immediate connection like you would have if you say, I lived at home in North Carolina where my entire family lives and had a whole community of people already built into my life. So then we were like, okay, how can we run with this? So I just reached out to a lot of my writer friends and some influencer friends and said, hey, like, can you tell me what that hashtag means to you as like an artist or as a person or as a foster parent? Like, what does that mean for you? Because it really is used throughout you can use it in everyday life of what your Nash village is. Like I have mine here of my small group at church, my friends, people that I've built a community with since moving here. And we want to re-implement that and make that a part of what foster care is to give them that built-in village of people they can count on at all times.
Yeah, and I appreciate you explaining that. And you know what, I want to bring this back at the end of the podcast and talk a little bit more about that, because I was going through your Instagram and you actually had some pretty cool, artists and influencers from the Nashville area involved in that. So I want to talk a little bit about that because some of them are actual mutual people that we know. So,
great.
But we'll get back to that. So
okay.
Take me back, a little bit, where did you grow up? Like you said, no one is really from here, and that's the whole premise of this podcast.
Yeah.
So, kind of talk me about that and walk me through that.
So I was actually born in California. My dad was in the military. I met my mom there. That's where she's from. So we were only there for about 8 months before we moved to a small town in North Carolina called Cherryville. If you're not from there, it's Cherryville, but nobody says it that way. It's just Cherryville. And that's where I spent pretty much my whole life until I went to college. And I up and moved to Huntington, West Virginia, and went to Marshall University for my undergrad. But I originally went for nursing school and then got about 8 weeks into my sophomore year and realized that was not what I wanted to do. And mind you, I had said from the age of 5, I was going to be a nurse. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with kids in that way. And that was it. And everyone's always like, was it just too hard? And I was like, no, it had nothing to do with that. I just knew that I wanted more out of my day-to-day life. I wanted more investment. I wanted to be involved some way different. And I was terrified to tell my parents. And I was like, this isn't what I want to do. So my mom was like, well, you have like 2 weeks to make a decision. Like, you're going to have to change your major so you don't fall behind. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I talked with her some, and she was like, well, the only thing I can really see is education or social work. And education was just not on my radar. It just wasn't my thing. I was like, I love teachers and I love what they do, but I don't feel like that's for me. So I went to my advisor and got into the intro to social work class the spring semester and got in and was like, okay, these are my people. This is where I'm supposed to be. But even then, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it, because social work is there's so many vast variety of jobs you can do with social work. Like, there's like endless amounts of opportunity of things you could do. And so I graduated and moved back home to North Carolina for a year, where I then worked for a children's advocacy center. And what they do is they have a model and they interview and work with children who are basically recording and being interviewed for court for sexual abuse and extreme cases of physical abuse. And so I got into that and became a forensic interviewer for a while. And then it was time to get into grad school. And so my professor called me from Marshall and said, hey, we got approved for our master's program. Will you come back and be a part of the inaugural class? And I said, sure. So I applied back in, got in. A few months later, moved back to Huntington for a year. got my master's that year. But while I was in grad school, I worked full time at a children's shelter. And what that means is we were basically a holding place, an emergency placement for kids who were either getting out of a residential institution, were being removed from their home, a foster home, another group home. This is a place they could come and be taken care of while in limbo, basically. And so at any given time, I had 15 kids in the home. It was me and another social worker that worked on site. It's supposed to be 5 days a week. We were there way more than 5 days a week and way more than 40 hours a week. But kids from all different walks of life, different parts of the state. I mean, all over West Virginia, they would come to this shelter and stay for months at a time. And I'm talking like all kinds of behaviors, different traumas, different diagnoses, different meds, different just everything. So you had kids punching holes in a wall while other ones are crying in the corner. Ones are yelling in your face, other ones are your best friend. And, you have a floor staff and that's not always enough, or they get mad at them. So they want to talk to you, but you're not there. So they call you at 2 a.m. to come in and see what's going on. And I definitely learned a lot in that job. But through that, I kind of got to see what it was like for especially older kids, just to have somebody to count on. And so that's when I kind of had the idea that I wanted to create something. I didn't know what, but something for them to basically get to be kids again, while also getting to dream. Because a lot of the kids that you work with, you're like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I can't go to school. I can't get a job. I can't, I'm not going to be anything. And I hate that. So I had looked at moving to Nashville because I just love everything about Nashville, everything from the music to the sports to the opportunity, the people. I just love everything about it. And kind of had talked myself out of it and was like, I'm just going to stay in Huntington. I'm comfortable here. My church is here. My friends are here. I'm just going to stay here. It's going to be fine. Looked at buying a house, went through the whole process, got the inspection, and the guy looked at me and was like, I'm not allowed to tell you can't buy this house, but if you were my child, I would tell you not to buy this house. And I was like, oh, okay. I looked at 5 to 7 other houses before I could even get to go look at them. An offer was put in on them. And I was like, okay, maybe staying here is not what I'm supposed to do. So I probably spent about 2 months looking for an apartment here in Nashville. Never came down here to look at it. I just looked online. I looked at reviews and talked to people. And I packed a U-Haul van the night before my last class, drove my van to class, and then drove from class to Nashville and moved into an apartment I had never seen. I didn't have a job. I didn't know anybody. Just picked up and moved my entire life here. And then I started a social work job at a community mental health center here. I joined a small group at Cross Point literally within a week. And then a year later is when I heard about National Angels.
Something you said, it really resonated with me. And you said, you were comfortable where you were. And, to me, sometimes you need to get out of your comfort zone. And, obviously there was a reason you were led here. So, and that shows in what you're doing now. So really, really quick, if you don't mind, I want to talk a little bit about foster care in general.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of misconceptions about it. People don't really understand what it is, but I mean, for listeners' purpose, can you just kind of explain what foster care actually is and, why kids are put into foster care?
Yeah. So there's a range of all of those things. So foster care was, built to create a space when kids have to be temporarily removed from their biological parents or relatives. Temporary. The whole goal of foster care is to be reunited with their family.
Right.
And I think that's a thing people often talk about of like, well, if I take this child in, what happens if I get attached? I don't want them to go. Well, in saying that, you're basically saying you want their biological parent to fail, which is hard. It's a hard thing to be in because you want them to have their family, but you also want to keep them after they've become a part of your family. And so kids are taken into foster care for all kinds of reasons, everything from abuse, any kind of drug use, domestic violence, homelessness, any kind of thing that basically where they feel like whoever they're living with is not deemed fit at that point in time. And that child can be in foster care for 2 months, 2 years, or forever. Like every child is different, but it is harder for older children, like that late preteen into teenage years to get taken in somewhere long term, because most people do want babies or toddlers or small children that are the same age as their kids. It's hard to take in a teenager who's been through a lot, who's also going to push you away because they don't trust you.
Sure.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of misconception about it. It's definitely hard. I will definitely say that. I think people are really excited about it and then get into it and not realize what you're bringing into your home when you bring in a child who's been through any kind of trauma. So I think like I have people like come in, like they expect little orphan Annie to come into their home, and that's not what you're getting when you bring in a child or a sibling set, you know. And, you know, people are always like, well, people are only in it for the money. I'm telling you, these people are not in it for the money. Like, they don't get paid that well to put up with what they're bringing into their home. I think the stat is like there's like 2% of the amount of foster parents where that's actually their motivation behind it, which is very slow. Yeah. There's always going to be, you can't say it's 100%. Everyone's in it for the right reason, because that you have to leave room for error in that. But yeah, I think more times than not, people just want to help. And this is a way for them to do that off and on throughout their life.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head too. I mean, being a foster parent isn't easy. I feel like it's something you really have to be led to do. You know, with that said, though, I think there's, you know, the blessings probably outweigh anything else.
For sure.
So we have some close personal friends my wife actually went to college with, and they're in Minnesota now, and their kids have grown up with mine, but they started fostering a couple years ago and started taking in babies, and they fostered 2 children, which now they've actually, the parents terminated rights and they were able to adopt them, and now they're fostering a 3rd.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to see that firsthand if you've never been, you know, involved in that process.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, going back to what I said, it's just, you know, I don't think, me personally, I couldn't just tell someone, oh, go foster, it's easy.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
I mean, my wife and I, we even started feeling led to do this because of our friends. A year ago, we started taking the classes, and then just for one reason or another, we missed a class or two. They want you to go to all the classes to, you know, be involved, but it's something we're still definitely looking at doing.
Yeah.
I want to specifically talk about, you know, the number of kids and some of the statistics as far as the numbers in foster care in Tennessee specifically. Yeah.
So I think as of right now, there's close to 9,000 kids in care across the state of Tennessee. And there are about 11 to 1,200 kids in Nashville and in every county that we touch. So everywhere from Wilson to Williamson, Rutherford, Robertson, like all those surrounding counties, there are about 1,200 kids in care at this very moment.
I want to spend a lot of the majority of the time, or the rest of the majority of time, talking about Nashville Angels. But and I don't know, and I wanted to talk a little bit about this. I mean, are you affiliated with DCS at all? Or, you kind of working independently?
Yeah, so we're an independent organization. We currently do a lot of our work with Monroe Harding, which is a private placement agency. So they're a foster adoption placement agency. So we get a lot of our referrals from them. But we also work some with youth villages. I have some friends over at DCS. Like if they need something, they'll call. So because we're independent, we can take on different agencies and we can take community referrals straight from the community or from an agency itself. So it kind of leaves us open where we can make sure every child gets served.
Okay. So where I was kind of leading to is, if there was someone listening that, like, oh, we've been thinking about foster care and, this kind of affirms something we want to get involved in. I mean, what are the first steps for someone specifically in our state if they want to, get involved or try to start becoming a foster family?
Yeah. So most of our placements go through the private agencies now, or like public agencies like Monroe Harding, Youth Villages, OmniVision, all of those. They're trying to move it to where they're placing all of the children. So I would say reach out to someone like Monroe Harding, Youth Villages, Omni, Agape is another one, Bethany Christian Services. They all have foster care departments. And I would just call and get some basic information. You can even email or call me if you have questions. I can walk you through that process as well. Just to kind of getting information, kind of get a picture of what you want before you step in and take all these classes. And you could get halfway through the classes and go, this is not for me. And that's totally okay. There is nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being self-aware and saying, I would love to help a child in foster care, but I'm not meant to have them in my home. And that's totally okay. And that's kind of what National Angels was built off of. It's not everyone's called to do that, but anybody can make a difference.
Let's dig into this with Nashville Angels. It looks like just January of this year, you started working full time for Nashville Angels, which it sounds like there's a story there. Can you kind of tell me, let's go back to what you mentioned earlier about when you found out about National Angels and kind of tell me about the evolution of Nashville Angels.
Yeah, so I was in small group literally pretty close to a year after I moved here. And one of my friends said, hey, do you know Rachel Hollis? And I was like, no, I don't. And now I say that, I'm like, oh my gosh, Rachel Hollis is huge. Everyone knows who she is.
Right.
And she was like, well, she has this podcast. And I think you would really like what she talks about in her podcast. And I was starting to get into the whole podcast thing because I was driving around a lot for work. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, it was about a week later. And I was just scrolling through her episodes and was just scrolling back. And there was one called How to Start a Nonprofit. And that was what I felt like I was being pushed to do and being called to do, but didn't really know. My brain runs 1,000 miles a minute in 100 different directions. So getting me to hone in on one problem and one solution is very difficult. And so I was like, let me just see what they're talking about. And so Susan, who is the founder and CEO of Austin Angels and National Angels, was her guest that day on the podcast. And so Susan just kind of talked about her heart behind starting Austin Angels and her vision for what National Angels could be and how she got there. And I'm riding in my car, like sobbing because I'm like, all right, this is it. And so at the end of the podcast, Susan says, we want this in your city. And if you also want this in your city, like, please reach out to us. And so mind you, this podcast is months old. So I'm thinking, what are the chances that someone else from Nashville hasn't already called her and started? But if they have, I want to be a part of it. So I sent in the little contact request on the website and had a response pretty quickly saying, hey, can you be on a phone call with Susan and some other people in the community around the country 4 weeks from today? And I was like, sure. Yeah, okay. And so, mind you, in that 4 weeks, I'm like digging into what they do, how they do it, who I would want to do this with me, all this stuff. And I get on the call in 4 weeks, and Susan gets on. It's like me and three other girls from different parts of the country. And she basically just brain dumps all this information of what it takes to get started, the cost, the board members, all the community stuff you have to get, all the stats, all this stuff. And I remember her saying, like, take a couple weeks, like, really chew on this, like, pray on it, whatever your thing is. And if you're eat, sleep, and dreaming this, we want you to come back to us. Well, I'm sitting there going, okay, well, if I'm already there, like, what do you mean take 2 weeks? I don't think, no. So I think I waited like maybe 3 days, and I like emailed her with all my stuff and was like, Susan, I know it's quick, but I'm all in. And she was like, can you be on a call with me a week from today? And I was like, sure. So I got on a phone call with Susan about a week later. We talked about a little hour and a half, just about my background and my heart behind it and why I felt like I was the right person for this job. And then she was like, well, can you be on a phone call with me and Sarah, who's the CFO? And I was like, yeah, okay. So I do that. And then I have like a Skype FaceTime interview with them. And Sarah's like, I'm going to have to do your background check. I'm sure you'll be fine, but, send us your board stuff. And my background check came back extremely quickly. So I sent the board information, and it was probably not even a month later when I got an email from Susan saying, all right, it's yours. So I was like, and I just kind of like sat there in shock of like,
yeah,
you're giving, wait, it's mine. You're giving this to me? Like, what? I was like, because suddenly all this is opening up. Like, I never expected it to happen that quickly, especially being so young and being like, yeah, here you go for it. Well, okay. And then we spent about, not quite a year, about 9 months fundraising. And then we went to Austin last July for our like official like chapter training, where we got our wings. We were officially launched. And then I up and quit my job in December to do this full time.
Yeah, I was reading about that, and I was like, "Wow, this is getting very real for you." I mean, not that it wasn't already, and you're running your own nonprofit now, and
Yeah.
so I'm going to read this. Your mission statement on the website says, your mission is to walk alongside children in the foster care system as well as their caretakers by offering consistent support through intentional giving, relationship building, and mentorship. So I want you to talk a lot more about that, as well as the awesome programs you're doing, specifically with Love Box and I think Dare to Dream. Those are your two main programs you run. So go ahead.
Yeah. So our mission is to really just wrap these families up, because on average, a child in care is going to move 7 times in 2 years, and that's a lot of times in a very short amount of time. And I can tell you from experience, I know kids who have moved way more times in a way less time frame. Just because so many homes will close within a year, and it's not even because they don't want to be in foster care anymore. They don't want the child they have. It's because they have a lack of support. And that's such an easy fix, I feel like. Like, if you just don't have support around you, we should be able to fix that easily so that you can keep doing what you're doing. Because there aren't enough foster parents as it is. We don't need to be losing the ones that we have. And so Susan and her team came up with the 2 programs, Love Box and Dare to Dream, and what that looks like. So Love Box is where, let's say I have a foster care referral for a family in Nashville, and then I find a group at a business or a local church or a friend group that says, hey, we want to be a Love Box. What can we do? So, we go through all the paperwork and go through all the needs assessments and make sure they're a good fit. And we will match that community group with that foster family for at least a year. The commitment is 1 year, but most families will go beyond that and they'll stay with their Love Box group, because once you get invested, it's kind of hard to separate from that. And so every month for that year, they will take a physical box full of just practical things that family might need. Everything from cleaning supplies to toilet paper and paper towels to laundry detergent, groceries, school supplies, whatever that family's going to need, they're going to bridge that gap and help them get those things. Just as like an assistance, like they go through a lot of toilet paper when you have 6 kids in your house, like it blows through, that. And so, but through that monthly of dropping off that box, they get to build and engage with this family in a whole new way because they're coming into their home and spending time with them. And what I love so much about this program is that, yes, it takes care of the parents and the children in care, but it's also if there are any adoptive children in the home, any biological children. I feel like that they tend to get forgotten about because they are worried about the child who just came into their home, but they're also going through a transition, just like the child in care and the parents are. So I love that this program totally encapsulates every single person in that home. And that community group basically just becomes an attachment to their family. So our Love Box group, our foster mom will call me and go, hey, something came up. Can you come watch the kids tomorrow? Yeah, I'll be there. Cool, great. Or if I can't, I call my Love Box. I'm like, hey, who can go watch the kids tomorrow? They have somewhere they have to be. Something came up and they need somewhere to watch the kids. And we make sure that they're taken care of because that's something so minuscule they shouldn't have to worry about. So they call us and say, hey, I need help with this. Yeah, you got it. We'll make it happen. And if we can't do it, we find someone who can, which is what I really love about that, because they really are. It's creating a stable environment and allowing a child or a parent to take a break for a second and say, okay, I need a break for a minute. I'm going to step out, but that we're going to be there to fill that space while they can take that break from each other. Because there's a lot that builds in that. There's a lot that builds with having trauma in your home like that. Different triggers, different arguments can start this, and then it becomes something totally different. It escalates, and having someone who can step in and give you a break is going to make it easier for you to keep that child in your home. So that's what the Love Box is really there to make sure that the parents are being supported to help these children, but you can also, while also supporting the children to make sure they're getting extra love and support that they also need outside of the parents who are taking care of them. And then if a child is ever reunited with a family, the Love Box group will follow that child into their home to make sure they're still getting what they need while being reunited with their biological family, which I think is really cool and also really important.
Yes, that is an awesome part of that.
And then Dare to Dream is our one-on-one mentoring program. So that is geared towards our kids who are at risk of aging out of foster care. Because once they turn 18, they age out. That's what happens. However, most states, including Tennessee, They can choose to stay in foster care until they're 21 and they can go to school for free. But we have to get them to graduation to have that opportunity. And a lot of, only like 50% of kids in foster care will graduate high school, which is not really a lot. That's not enough because they have so much potential, but they don't really see that.
You talked about aging out, and I know our friend who's a foster parent talks about that, and just, you know, I guess just the outcomes or the negative outcomes that come out of that. Yeah. So, I mean, if they age out of the foster care system and they're not properly, you know, mentored and, you know, I guess supported, I mean, what are some of those outcomes?
Yeah. So once they age out, if they don't have any support in place, the risk for homelessness, any kind of addiction, alcohol, drugs, the trafficking risk goes up with that because they're living on the streets or staying with people they don't know. They can't usually get a job very easily or keep one because they don't have any kind of training. They don't really know how to get that because sometimes they don't have an ID. Sometimes they don't know how to operate, you know, local transit to get to a job, to get to wherever. They don't have clothes to wear that are nice for an interview. They don't know how to interview. They don't know how to, you know, budget. They don't know how to go to the grocery store and get what they need with what they have. And so the Dare to Dream program really looks at all of those things and says, okay, I'm going to teach you how to budget your money every month. I'm going to teach you how to go to the grocery store and meal prep for yourself so that you always have food for all parts of the day. I'm going to work with you about internet safety and body safety and being safe in the community and being safe when you're around people you don't know. And so that whole program is just based around, you know, you don't have anyone to fall back on, but you've got us. And for the older kids especially, they already think they don't have anybody and they can't do anything with their life. So we want to help change their mindset and be like, we're going to get you to graduation. You are going to graduate high school.
Yeah.
And then go to the military, go to vocational school, go to college. Make sure they know they have options.
A big part of your organization is no doubt, you know, people stepping up and volunteering, being mentors and whatnot. I mean, are you utilizing what you called your community groups as being mentors and volunteers, or is there opportunities for other people to just say, hey, I want to get involved? You know, we're not a foster family, but, you know, we're behind this. We want to get involved and help out any way we can.
Yeah. So we will take everyone who wants to be a part of this. So they can go on our website under our programs tab, and they can sign up to be a Love Box leader or a Dare to Dream mentor. I will say we're still in the works of launching our mentoring program because right now our case manager is volunteer, so she can only take on so much. But we are working on, well, once COVID kind of, you know, dies back down, we're going to work on having at least like some kind of meetings every quarter where you can come and get information. We can see what you're really looking for out of these programs and figure out what's most appropriate for you. And then we also have, like, we just had Love Box Saturday a couple weeks ago, and we built 24 Love Boxes on a Saturday to go give to Monroe Harding for every single family that had children in their home for just summer activities and stuff. So there are tons of ways you can get involved, and we would love to talk to anyone who wants to or just has questions. We've had to re-navigate our, you know, coffee and conversations and things with COVID. So we're going to be launching some virtual ones, hopefully in the next couple of months, that people can come on and ask questions and hear more about what we're doing and see what's the best fit for them. But yes, anyone can sign up to be a Love Box leader or a mentor or a volunteer in general.
Awesome. And I think you said that info is on your website, but I'll ask you again at the end of the podcast to share all of that information too. So I want to go back to what we started talking about. It Takes a Nash Village. Yes. I know that was for your big campaign. And I was looking, and you have, you know, if anyone is familiar with the Nashville area and some of the people that live here, whether the artists or I guess you could call them celebrities, you've had quite a few people, you know, kind of back Nashville Angels. Yeah. So I had to ask because my wife is a fan, but so I saw you had Caitlin Bristow and Jason Tardik involved. And so how did that even happen?
So when we were in Austin last July, Susan had approached me and said, you know, they had done an influencer day in Austin the year before for Christmas. Did this huge Christmas give back. Rachel Hollis and like people like that all got involved, and the Lemieux family flew out there, and Amy Brown, and they all, you know, went shopping and did this whole big give back. And she goes, I think we could do that in Nashville. I think Nashville has really high potential for that. And I was like, heck yeah, I'm all about that. Let's do it. And I was like racking my brain, like, okay, who can we get that would really just like below people's minds that would just really love to get involved with something like this. And I think I found Caitlin's like agent email, like on Instagram or her website or something. And I just sent them an email and was like, listen, I don't know if they would be interested in something like this, but this is what we're doing. We would love to have her. Like, just let me know. And I got an email a couple weeks later and she was like, oh, her and Jason are so excited. They can't wait. Well, just let us know what they have to do. And I was like, holy cow.
Oh, wow.
Caitlin and Jason to help us with this Christmas project. Like, what the heck just happened? Because I'm a huge Bachelorette fan. And so
Right.
I was excited because really I was like, I'm going to send this email. We'll probably never hear anything, but at least I can say I tried. And the fact that they were the first ones to commit, I was like, oh my gosh, what did we just start?
It just goes to show, ever since I moved to Nashville, everyone here, whether, they're a recognized person or whatnot, they seem like they're always willing to help out. Yes. Or, just come together as a community, specifically in Nashville. And that's unlike anything I've ever had. And I originally came from the Chicago area. Okay. So it's unbelievable. It's awesome for you guys, but it's kind of not surprising that they would jump on board.
For sure.
That's awesome. Who else? Let's go ahead and do some name dropping. Who else have, this is a Nashville based podcast. Who else have you had, come behind you and help support you guys?
So we had Danielle Maltby, also from the Bachelor franchise, came and helped us out. And then Eddie from the Bobby Bones show came, which he is a foster parent. So it was really cool to get to work with him and his wife some that day and get to meet them and kind of talk about their story. And then I don't know if you know Hunter Kelly. He does a podcast with Ashley Eicher here in Nashville, and they're great. And so he did our campaign with us for It Takes a Nash Village, which I thought was really cool because I just think he's an amazing human being. And so the fact that he was on board so quickly to do something like this for us was really cool. We've had some local artists who've been really behind us since the beginning, which has been amazing. They'll post about us. They'll play events for us. They did virtual shows for us for Big Payback, which was great. Yeah. We've had a lot of really good, I'm not going to call it luck because I don't feel like that's what it is, but a lot of really good experiences with the influencer scene in Nashville and the artist scene and just people who really are looking for a way to get involved. And were touched by what we were doing. And that was really important to us, that they had a passion for what we were doing and they wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I wanted to give a shout out to Court Carpenter.
Yes, I love Court.
So funny story, and I want to know how he got involved with this or how you got him. So I randomly went into Tequila Cowboy on Broadway a couple years ago, and he was playing, and I have to say he's an amazing musician. I mean, it's a step above of a lot of Nashville music. I mean, he seems like the real deal. He seems like a good guy. His music's awesome. So, is he someone you just reached out to, or did you know him already?
So I met Court 5 years ago. I was at CMA Fest for the first time, and I had heard about Court before then and knew about his music. And so when we met him that day, his first big single, Let Me See Your Koozie, had just come out. And we walked over to his booth just to say hi, take pictures, get autographs, the CMA Fest tourist thing to do. And we had just chatted for a few minutes, and I was like, I love the song. And he's like, great, make sure you tell everyone about it. Cool, great. And I followed him on social media, didn't think anything of it. And then it was about a year and a half later, we walked into Crazy Town, maybe. We were in town for my aunt's birthday. We just all come to town to celebrate. And I had walked in, and we were sitting there listening, and he's like, do I know you? And I was like, we met one time almost 2 years ago. So, maybe kind of, but not really. And since that, we had just kind of stayed in contact. And then I moved down here. And when I was in town, I'd make sure we saw him, and we would chat and hang out when we were around and at shows and stuff. So we kind of just became friends through, I feel like that's the Nashville thing. You just meet people and then you just kind of become friends with them. And Court has been one of our biggest supporters since we started, more than happy to share stuff for us and come out for stuff and say, oh, I'll post it on my Instagram and tell people to go look at it or come, and then made a video for us. And he was one of the very first people who was like, whatever you need, I've got your back. And I was like, man, that means so much. But, he's always like, you've supported me, and this is a way I can now support you, which is how I feel like a lot of the artists that I've become friends with, that's their thing of like, you've done so much to support and share our stuff. Like, this is just a chance for us to do it for you, which I think is so cool. I feel like it's such a Nashville community thing. Like, everyone just takes care of each other.
Well, cool. I wanted to figure out that connection because I saw you were posting some of his stuff. And I know we went on a tangent, but shout out to Court Carpenter. There's a lot of Nashville country music, but I think his is, the real deal. He's a really awesome musician. So
yeah, I agree.
So what do you do outside of Nashville Angels, or even if you have time? I mean, full time running this now.
So I also work part time at the Grand Ole Opry at the gift shop, but I haven't been there since March because of COVID.
Yeah.
But I've been there for over 2 years. It's one of my favorite things about my life. I'm not going to lie. I love going there. I love being there. I just work in the nights and on the weekends. And like, it started as like, I just need extra cash when I was doing social work. And then it got to a point where I didn't really need the cash anymore, but I just loved it so much and loved the people and loved the atmosphere and loved the job, where I was like, I'm just going to stay because I like it too much. And I'm a huge country music person and Nashville history. I love all that kind of stuff. And so basically getting to go home from work after a really hard day and then going into a fun environment where you get to talk about Nashville and country music all night and just have fun with people was just like, this is great. So I just kept it and I loved it. And then I do stuff with Crosspoint with my church. That's where I go. So I do small group with that and other things when they have opportunities to serve. And then I just recently announced that I'm going to start a podcast, which I never thought I would ever do. But we're going to go for it and see what happens.
Yeah. And hopefully, I think you had reached out to me. You're like, hey, give me some ideas for microphones. So I hope I hope that works out for you, because otherwise I might look bad.
I'm sure it'll be great.
Well, hey, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I appreciate you sharing your story. I've been looking forward to having you on since, Wendy told me about you and the organization. I've been following you ever since. So you sprinkled this a little bit in the middle here, but how can listeners find out more about Nashville Angels or even get involved?
Yeah, so we're on Facebook and Instagram. Nashville Angels Nonprofit is the tag for both. And then our website is just www.nashvilleangels.org. And we have, whenever we have events coming up, we'll post them there. And sometimes we need volunteers for those, so we'll have a tab for that. But then our programs tab has the signups for Love Box and Dare to Dream. And if you're unsure if they want to even do that yet, they just want to talk, feel free to email me. My email is on the website, or just send me a message on Instagram or Facebook.
I really hope you enjoyed the episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can always email me at 99percentlocalpod@gmail.com. Or you can actually drop by the contact page on the website and send a voice message that may appear in a future episode. Speaking of the website, you can find it at 99percentlocalpod.com. And while you're there, make sure you catch up on any and all past episodes. If you'd like to support the show, you can do it in a few different ways. Please follow the podcast on Instagram or Facebook at 99percentlocalpod. Leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast. The best thing you can possibly do is share this podcast with your friends who might want to check it out. Lastly, would you consider contributing to this podcast on a one-time or ongoing basis? All contributions that I receive, 10% of that goes to the Well Outreach in Spring Hill, Tennessee. And until next week, stay safe and be kind to those around you.